Consider the typical reaction if you were to tell someone that you're reading a history book by an ancient Greek. The reaction is, how is that relevant? That war took place 2,400 years ago. Thucydides gives us an answer, and it's an answer that most thinking people would come up with if they pause and reflect for a moment. Now, he says that he's telling this story because he wants us to learn something from history. He believes that we can learn lessons from history. But he goes even further than that. He explains why we can learn from history and what in particular it is about history. What is the constant in history that enables us to learn? If you think about it, many things change. Languages change, governments change, religions change, political structures change, military alliances change, technologies change. But there's one thing that doesn't change in human history, and that's human nature. And that's what Thucydides says. He says, I know that many people who are looking for excitement, looking for the romance of a story, as one particular translation says, people who are looking for entertainment and excitement and romance will find this boring. But he says, for those people who understand that in human things nothing changes, for them they'll find lessons. It's for those people that I'm writing. He says, if it be judged useful by those inquirers who desire an exact knowledge of the past as an aid to the understanding of the future, which in the course of human things must resemble it if it does not outright reflect it, I shall be content. In other words, Thucydides recognizes that we can learn from history and learn from this particular story about the Peloponnesian War because human nature doesn't change. If we see in this story illustrations of the corruption that comes about by the acquisition of great power, we might expect to see that happening in our time. If we read in this story examples about what people act under great stress and great fear in times, for example, of plague or revolution, then we can guess when those similar circumstances occur in our time, we will see similar reactions on the part of the human beings who experience it. If we see how people react in the face of fear, the cowardice that most people show and the nobility that a few people show, we can expect to see that in times of fear and terror. It's perfectly obvious that in our culture in modern times we still experience all those things. There are people who acquire great power. There are people who are under great stress. There are people who are faced with fear and terror in individual and national circumstances. So if we want to understand why people do what they do, and perhaps even predict, you might say, what's going to happen if such and such an event comes about that it looks like it's likely to happen, history gives us those sorts of clues because human nature doesn't change. Everything else changes, but human nature doesn't. There are people who don't think so. There are people who think that human nature does change. When I was studying history in college, I had a professor who argued that this is an unfounded assumption, that human nature does change, or it can. He said, we never know what people will do tomorrow. And so in class I raised my hand and said, then why do you teach history, professor? And he said, well, it's a living. So he studied history and taught history because he thought it was fun, but not because he thought we could actually learn anything. But if you keep studying history and look at later historians, which we will do in this Old Western Culture series, the historians of the Roman period, of the medieval Christian period, and of the modern period, over and over, until fairly recent times, historians always point this out. They always say that there's a value to history in terms of the lessons we can learn.